Hello, good people of YouTube, Mountbatten here, and today we're talking about a ship that is available right now for everyone who has 11.0 installed to purchase, and that is the Tier V Premium British Battleship, the Agincourt. So the Agincourt before was only available through the Battle of Jutland containers. That was kind of a pain to get the ship through that, of course. But now, with the release of 11.0, she is in the army, available for doubloons for the normal cost of a Tier 5 premium ship. And the Agincourt is well, she's a pretty darn memey ship. Like, this ship is, it's so dumb, but it's the good kind of dumb. Now, the Agincourt was, of course, a real steel ship, which is always a good thing in many of World Warships players' eyes. And she is a bit of a nutter here in-game, as well as, look at this thing. Absolutely bristling with guns. This is from the time period of, let's just bolt as many freaking main battery guns as we can get onto a ship. And I really do enjoy this time period because we get nutter designs like this. So, the Agincourt, let's run through her real quick since she is being released today for the general population to purchase. So, she is, of course, a Tier 5 British battleship. And being a Tier 5, she is, of course, a Dreadnought-style battleship. And she is, well, she is pretty chunky. She has a 102mm wraparound belt that goes up into a 152mm side plate there. So you get a nice icebreaker bow there. But above and below that, she is covered in 19mm of plating. Same story for the stern too, has a nice icebreaker stern, I guess you'd call it, with again 19mm above and below and a 152mm plating. Side plating is 229mm. Upper plating is 152mm. Deck is 19 for the bow. Mid deck is 38, and stern deck is 19 as well. And her citadel is right below the waterline, and she does have a bit of a turtleback coming down to cover it. So it's not that hard to pierce through the nose and the stern of this ship, but you do have to remember that you're going to be going up against a lot of course, Tier 5 and the occasional Tier 7 match in this ship. So at most, you have to deal with Tier 7 battleship guns. And even those battleship guns, except for a select few ships, aren't overwhelmingly accurate enough to accurately, consistently hit your 19mm stern. Once you get up to like Tier 7, yeah, and Tier 6, the Americans are pretty accurate at that tier, and close in with the, of course, close in, that doesn't really matter at that range, but at medium range, unless you're going against a Soviet battleship in its, within its gimmick zone, you won't be consistently eating pins through there, unless, again, you're at close range. And the rest of the ship is, again, pretty chunky, too, and if you know how to angle and know your armor scheme, you can make this work pretty decently well. But that 19mm bow and stern does extend a fairly long ways away down the side of the ship, but once you get to the middle, it's properly chunky there. Now, for her survivability, she is a British battleship. She has a lower hit point count than most other Tier 5 battleships have at 48,400 and a 14% torpedo protection damage reduction. Now, of course, the overwhelmingly main feature of this ship is its overwhelming number of main battery guns. She has 14 305mm guns with a 36-second reload time, 36-second 180 time on the turret, which is actually pretty nice considering how many freaking guns you have. Maximum dispersion of 213 meters, the build that I have on the ship, and her sigma is 1.5. And her maximum range is 15.3 kilometers with no way to extend that. Now, her HE is pretty decent. Her maximum damage with her HE is 4,400. Her chance of causing a fire per shell is 31%. She has 76mm of HE pin, and the HE comes up the tubes at 831 meters a second. Her AP does a maximum damage of 8,100 and comes up the tubes at 831 meters a second as well. So the HE is, of course, the main focus of the ship, having 14 guns and pretty darn good HE. Now, 31% fire chance may not sound a lot considering it's a British battleship, but guys, it's got 14 guns. you won't have a problem starting fires. From my experience with the Agincourt, it's definitely almost like every other salvo you start a fire, which makes this ship a fantastic, absolutely fantastic damage farmer for random battles. Absolutely. The match we're watching right now is actually a fairly low damage game for the Agincourt, but it shows off a lot of the strengths and weaknesses of the ship pretty darn well in this match. Most matches with the Agincourt, you'll be easily over 100k at Tier 5, which is pretty ridiculous for a Tier 5 battleship. Granted, the game lasts long enough for you to actually do that. Even at Tier 5, the games are somehow just breezing by with ships that barely go 20 knots, but you know, that's the game nowadays. More on the guns in a second. Secondary is an absolute surprise when the ship was announced, is that the ship was going to be a secondary ship. And she is. So she gets 10 of these 76mm deck guns that reload in 2.3 seconds and have a maximum range of 8.3 kilometers. They can pin 13mm of armor. They have a 4% chance of causing a fire, maximum damage of 1100. And they come out the tubes at 823 meters a second. Now, her 152mm guns, these can pin 25mm of armor, which is, of course, more than what you need at Tier 5. They have a reload time of 3.4 seconds, maximum range of 8.3 kilometers, and they come out the tubes at 914 meters a second and do a maximum damage of 2200. Now, most of your secondaries are these 2152s, which means that your secondaries can, of course, cross the threshold needed at Tier 5, 25mm. That's more than enough at Tier 5 to punish cruisers, a lot of battleships, and, of course, DDs as well. And you've got a lot of them, and it is beautiful. An 8.3 kilometer secondary range. That's longer than the Germans at Tier 5. Let that sink in. 8.3 kilometers. That's more than you get on the Derflinger. You know, the new battlecruiser secondary line? Yeah. This is, again, an absolutely dumb but good dumb ship. No, there's no A. It doesn't exist on the Agincourt. Of course, a ship from frickin' 1914 didn't really concern itself too much with aircraft, so there's none of that on there. So when you get into a CV game, it's you can shout at them pretty angrily, but you don't even have, you know, some dude on the deck with a Webley or anything like you have on the Dreadnought, at least. So, yeah, just know that you're pretty much screwed if a CV shows up. Concealment 11.9 kilometers, not terrible for a Tier 5 battleship. You can get that down, I believe, down to 10 if you take the commander skill. But, I mean, it's Tier 5. It's all the battleships have terrible concealment at Tier 5. Agincourt is no exception there. So how is this ship in game? She's a ton of fun. Just absolute nutter of a ship. Absolute meme boat. You can burn the world down with your HE with those 14 305mm guns. And the AP is not bad on it either. I mean, you have 14 guns. 14 guns with AP. I don't care what it is. If you get 14 guns off at its broadside, it's gonna hurt. I do not care what tier it is. 14 305mm guns are going to hurt it. Now, couple that with the secondaries, this is a pretty decent brawler. And you know what's coming up in this patch? A Tier 5 brawl season that you could take the Agincourt in. Now, it is slow. The armor isn't the greatest, but I mean, with 8.3 kilometer secondaries at Tier 5, 14 guns with absolute god levels of HE and pretty darn good AP too. If you div up with your friends in these brawls, which I believe divs are allowed in this season of brawls, or even by yourself too, I mean, this ship is pretty darn formidable. And let's not forget too that it does have a fairly decent heal, and you can get 5 of these heals. It recharges 290 HP hit points per second. HP hit points, I just said hit points. It's active for 30 seconds and reloads in 76 seconds, so it's not that long of a reload either, and you can get 5 charges of it. Besides that, there's no other consumables that the Agincourt gets. So even if you don't want it for brawls, you just want it for random, it's a fantastic random farmer. Absolutely fantastic. It's great at just melting whatever needs to get melted, even when it gets up tiered, because remember, fires don't really care about tier once they're set. Now, yes, there is a baked in fire resistance for each tier, but what I mean is that it doesn't matter if I'm in this thing and you're in a Yamato. I'm still going to be setting fires on your Yamato, and it's going to burn the same Doesn't matter that it came from a tier 5 ship to a tier 10 ship, the fire is going to burn. And this is a very, 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 very good ship for doing that. And plus, again, it's a real still historical ship, and a pretty darn unique one too at that, and one that I would recommend you guys pick up. And it's tier 5, it's not that expensive either, and down at tier 5, there's a lot less CVs and a lot less submarines that we're seeing more and more in high. Well, actually, when this video goes live, there will be no submarines for 2 patches, but I'm sure they're going to return. So you have less of that down at tier 5. And again, tier 5 is a pretty fun, derpy tier. You know, you point end of your battleship toward the enemy team, drive at them, and then you kind of punch each other for a couple of minutes. It's still a lot of fun down there when you don't get up tiered, of course. But again, this is a ship that up tiers pretty darn good with that HE. So guys, just want to do a quick little review here of the Agincourt, especially with brawls coming out this patch. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. On our way to 35,000 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.